Are ulcerative colitis and IBS the same thing? Quick answer no, they are not. Let's talk about it.
Welcome to What the Poop, the podcast where we flesh out the realities of living with ulcerative colitis. I'm your host, Teri Holland, and after more than 3 decades of navigating the ups and downs of ulcerative colitis, I'm here to share my experiences, insights, and a little bit of humor to help you through your journey. In this podcast, we are dishing the scoop on what it really means to live with ulcerative colitis. We'll share stories, tips, and the latest info to help you navigate your journey. Whether you're newly diagnosed or you've been battling UC for years, this is your space to find community, laugh at the absurdities, and learn from others who get it. No topic is off limits, and no question is too awkward. So if you're ready to break the silence and take control over your ulcerative colitis, join me on What the Poop, because living with UC doesn't have to be a solo journey. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts, and let's face this together.
Let's start with the elephant in the room. I don't know a single person with ulcerative colitis who doesn't absolutely hate it. When someone says to them, "Oh, I have IBS, I totally understand what you're going through." First of all, no, you do not. Now, I will preface this by saying that if you have IBS, I feel for you. That is awful. It's uncomfortable. It's embarrassing. It's certainly not fun to deal with, but it is not the same thing as ulcerative colitis. And let's not confuse the two any longer. I think one of the reasons that people get IBS and ulcerative colitis or Crohn's confused and they think that they're all the same is because ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease fall under inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD, where IBS kind of sounds similar to IBD, except they are not the same. No matter what people try to tell you, they are not the same. So let's compare the two and talk about how they are completely different so that we can get that out of our heads and so that you, my friends who have ulcerative colitis, know what to say to someone who says, "Oh, I totally understand. I have IBS." To me, it's kind of like comparing someone who has cut their finger and maybe they cut it really badly. I cut my finger once slicing lemons when I worked at a restaurant, and I needed to get stitches, or rather, a stitch, a single stitch in my finger to stop the bleeding. I would not compare that to someone who had their finger cut off. And that might seem extreme of an example to say, well, comparing IBS to ulcerative colitis is like comparing cutting your finger to severing your finger off entirely. Except that's a pretty fair comparison in my world. So let's compare. Let's talk about the differences and the similarities between these two illnesses so that we can understand them better. And so that at your next family dinner, you can tell your Aunt Shirley that no, she does not understand what you are actually going through. First, what do they mean? Well, IBD is inflammatory bowel disease. The key word there is disease. IBS is irritable bowel syndrome. Syndrome meaning it is not a disease. It is a collection of symptoms. IBD encompasses Crohn's and colitis, specifically ulcerative colitis, because there are different kinds of colitis. And we can talk about that another time. So right away, these two conditions are very different. One is a disease that is categorized as autoimmune. The other one is a syndrome, a collection of symptoms. Our language here matters. Now, let's begin with some of the similarities. And this is where people think that they understand ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease when they have, in fact, IBS. So some similarities, both may be linked to genetics, both may start at any age, both may get progressively worse if they're not treated, and both can cause a lot of emotional distress. So IBS is a syndrome. Ulcerative colitis is a disease. Crohn's is a disease. So this means a syndrome versus a disease. Now, doctors don't know exactly what causes either one of these conditions, but let's go over some of the signs and symptoms of each. So in terms of the gastrointestinal tract, and I'm getting this from healthline.com, by the way, I don't want you to think that this is all my own information. I like to look things up for this podcast because even though I've lived with it for over 30 years, I want to make sure that what I'm sharing with you is correct information. And just as a reminder, I am not a doctor, I'm not a physician, I'm not your gastroenterologist. I'm just a person who lives with the disease. So in terms of gastrointestinal signs and symptoms, ulcerative colitis is characterized by watery, bloody, or mucousy stools, frequent bowel movements, loss of appetite. I would add in there cramping. Cramping and gastrointestinal pain or discomfort, doctors like to call it, but pain. That's not listed here. I don't know why. IBS, mucousy stools, fecal incontinence, diarrhea, constipation, flatulence, bloating, nausea. And then elsewhere in the body, ulcerative colitis symptoms include weight loss, which I think I mentioned before. I never get that one unless I'm really, really extreme. And that's probably the only symptom that sometimes I think I would like to get. I'm saying that tongue in cheek, don't come at me for it. Fatigue, arthritis, ulcers in the mouth, that's a fun one. Eye irritation, bone density issues, skin changes, liver issues, anemia. Elsewhere in the body for IBS, urinary symptoms, back pain. That's it. Other differences. So in terms of who gets it, males and females. So under ulcerative colitis, we have males and females, primarily 15 to 30 years old, but it can occur at any age. IBS mostly affects females, ages 15 to 65. Triggers. We don't know the triggers of ulcerative colitis yet. They're still under investigation, but some suspected ones are things like genetics. Stress is sometimes a trigger, but still unknown. And for IBS, the triggers include certain foods or stress. Complications. Potential long-term effects of having ulcerative colitis include permanent damage to the colon or colon cancer. There is no permanent damage associated with IBS. Treatment. For ulcerative colitis, medication to address inflammation and to induce remission. And sometimes surgery is necessary. For IBS, it's lifestyle and diet changes, probiotics, sometimes medication, and sometimes therapy for mental health. So while these two diseases can seem really similar, on the outside, they are by no means the same at all. They are very different illnesses with very different complications and issues. And I cannot tell you how many times I have had someone say that to me that, oh, I totally get it. I have IBS. You don't get it. You don't. We might have some similar stories about having accidents or not making it to the bathroom on time, which is a reality for both of these illnesses. But the severity of ulcerative colitis or of Crohn's is extremely different day to day than someone dealing with IBS. Now, please don't get me wrong, and certainly don't come at me for this. I am not trying to diminish what someone with IBS feels or experiences day to day. It's just not a fair comparison to compare to ulcerative colitis. I feel like with IBS, you have far more control over the day to day of your disease in terms of changing what you eat, supplementing, managing stress levels. With ulcerative colitis, those same things don't always have the same impact on us. In fact, I could go a whole day and not eat anything and still suffer from ulcerative colitis symptoms. Even if my system is completely emptied out, I still get symptoms of ulcerative colitis. And I have been on so many different dietary regimens, and I've still had ulcerative colitis. So it's just not fair to compare these two diseases. And while I know that people with IBS suffer and it's embarrassing and it's awful to have, it's just not the same thing. So if you are listening to this and you have IBS, know that I feel for you, but please just don't compare it to having ulcerative colitis. They're just not the same. And I hope this makes sense. And I hope this helps those of you who are listening who have IBD conditions. Crohn's, or ulcerative colitis, and recognizing that what you are experiencing is very real and very painful. And to be quite blunt, shitty, literally shitty. And so the next time you're at a family dinner and Aunt Shirley says, "Oh dear, I completely understand what you're going through. I have IBS." You can politely, or not politely if you want, simply say, "With all due respect, Aunt Shirley, these are not the same conditions at all. And although we might share a couple symptoms, the enormity of my disease far exceeds your illness. And these are very different things to deal with." I hope this was helpful in that. And I hope that any of you listening with IBS, if anyone with IBS is listening, I hope you're not hurt over this, because I do hope that you get relief to your symptoms soon. All right. Thanks for joining me here. Also, I'm sorry I've been kind of absent lately. I'll talk about that in the next episode of where I've been and what I've been doing and why I haven't been recording this show as often. We'll talk about that in another episode. All right. Bye for now, my friends.